the idea of the book of Wired Differently was all based on this. It's even hard for me to say it sometimes. It's based on, why was I successful? Why was I lucky enough? Let me get this out here. Why was I lucky enough or fortunate enough, or what was different about me that allowed me to be successful in life? Not only just, in circumstantial things in sports like football and wrestling, and I was a pole vaulter in high school, but then on to college, and I was fortunate enough to play on a small college football team at Manchester University, and I was acclaimed there, and actually became an All-American, and was inducted into the Hall of Fame there. And it just was a great run. But those were successes that were kind of stacking on this pressure of being even more successful in life. Because when you're in sports or you're in school, you're practicing to be successful, right? And I've told all my kids, do you want to be average? Do you want to be average? And the answer is clearly no. And we talk about that in the book. But growing up is merely practice for becoming successful. So what is success? And we're going to talk about that briefly. We talked about it 2 shows ago. Success is merely this idea of you reaching the goals that you have set for yourself, you finishing a plan that you had set for yourself. The success we talked about is not to become a millionaire. I think we said becoming a millionaire is stupid. The idea is to become a successionaire. A successionaire is someone who becomes successful in several stages and does it as many as 1,000,000 times, so we can be called a successionaire. So that's kind of what we were building on. And this whole concept of Wired Differently allows me to kind of open up the floodgates and just talk about myself, which is my favorite subject, right? But the point of the matter is, I can talk about myself, and it is my favorite subject now. And I can come out and say that because, I don't care, but I care. I'm not trying to be arrogant, but I guess it is a little bit. But if you can live through me, I live through other people. I think it's important that you are your most favorite thing to think about. I think it's important that you think about yourself and how you affect other people, right? It's not arrogance. It's just the truth, man. So wired differently, people talk. I want people to understand when I talk about being wired differently, I'm talking about mostly, the traits that I've had that's made me successful. It doesn't mean you have to prescribe to those traits. It doesn't mean you have to be like me. I'm not saying that at all. But if there's one thing about me I would challenge you to be is insignificant. You see, insignificant is clearly a trait of this wired differently personality trait, or this wired differently persona, or this wired differently world that I'm trying to share with people about my success and where I'm going. And it all comes through 3 stages of being wired differently. And I wrote about it actually in the book. And here's the workbook. I know it's in reverse. Wish I could turn it around. But the Wired Differently workbook. And in the workbook, we talk about the framework of being wired differently, right? And there's 3 clear stages of being wired differently. I'm not going to teach on all this today, but I want you to understand that the first stage of being wired differently is this genetic stage. We all come out in the birthing room wired differently, right? God made us crazy, man. Like 1 billion neurons by the time you're like 3 months old in the womb. By the time we're out, we have 1 quadrillion neurons. There's a lot of neurons, and we're all completely. Can you imagine the staggering combinations of 1 quadrillion neurons? Well, that's the stage 1 of wired differently. Everybody's wired differently. Everybody. Everybody's wired differently. Everybody's God's child. Everybody's wired differently. But then something happens. By the time we're 7 years old, man, all these neurons stop baking and they start to reside. Because by the time you're 7, you have been formed. You have been molded in the image of your mother, your father, your teacher, your coach, your nanny, your babysitter, everything you've been exposed to. And you move into what we call stage 2, the attitudinal disorder stage, right? I got some friends that love that. Because wired differently people are attitudinally disordered. And that's where kind of the cut comes. Some people don't have a certain amount of drive, don't have a certain amount of things that we talk about. And that's not bad, but that's really the fun part of being wired differently. When we talk about me jumping out of a plane or dealing with maybe the mafia at a certain point in the book and all the things that are going on, and that's that attitudinal disorder of being wired differently. This kind of attractive, kind of obnoxious, kind of abrasive, kind of endearing, kind of humiliating, kind of egotistical, kind of, William Shatner, right? This wired differently attitudinal disorder. But the last stage, which is probably the most important stage of being wired differently, is the last one, actualization. Actualization is this idea where you've really kind of come to understand that you were, yes, born genetically wired differently. And yes, you really are different when it comes to success and drive and all the things that attitudinal disorders people do and say, and that piece, that drive, that cut of you that just won't let you be normal. You're kind of a misfit. You're kind of weird. You're kind of just don't go along with the crowd. You kind of say what you feel when you're going to say it. And sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. You want to help people one time, and then another time you want to beat somebody in a race or a tournament or in business. You just want to be a winner. All these things, this success or this high attitude of energy that drives you is this attitudinal disorder. But the third is this enlightenment. The third is this actualization, and that's where you really start to hone these favors that you have from becoming an attitudinal disordered individual. And you find rational things. You learn how to use your attitudinal disorder to razor sharp your skills in business and people skills and growing families and growing people. Which brings me to basically, now you had a little lesson on attitudinal disorder, genetic, and actualization. But I wanted to just say all that to tell you a quick story about me when I was a young boy and why I kind of turned out the way I did. I know yesterday I had a post on Facebook, man. All right. I did do the post on purpose. All right. I did try to turn up the heat a little bit. I did want people to be controversial with me on the post. So, because I was trying to make a point. Yeah. And I'm going to basically tell you the story about me being a little boy, and we're going to get back to the quote. So here's one of the reasons that I'm attitudinal disordered. Here's one of the reasons that I've been motivated to be the person I am and who I'm going to be and how I'm going to be it. And it's just a quick story about I was probably 12 years old, and I went to the little elementary school in Hudson, Michigan. And every day after school, I would go across the street to the high school to help my father, who was a high school football coach. My dad is Tom Saylor. He was a prolific high school football coach in Michigan and in Angola, Indiana. And one day I got over there after going there time and time again over years, a couple years, and helping water and do all the things. I got down to the field, and there he was. I said, I could see my dad on the field, but it was an unusual day. It was an unusual practice and an unusual moment because it was really kind of tense and really kind of almost violent in some regards, in a different form than football. See, there was no footballs on the field. None. Matter of fact, they didn't even have helmets on. They had their pads, but no helmets. And I watched as men were jumping and screaming and shouting, and crawling under the ropes, rolling in the mud. And they had guys over their shoulders, and they were carrying them across the field. And I couldn't help but hear the players yelling, "Get up, get up, get up." I mean, you're going to die if you don't get up. It was just bizarre. And another guy was yelling at another guy, "Don't quit. Don't quit. You will die if you quit." And it was so intense. And finally, my dad walked over because he saw the perplexed look on my face, how nervous I was and kind of spooked of the situation. He said, "Son, what's wrong?" And I said, "Dad, I don't know what's going on. There's no footballs, and I've never seen you like this. I've never seen you yelling and making things so much about life and death." I said, Dad, just tell me, Father, what's going on?" He said, "Well, son, today is around football practice. Today is war games. And I said, war games, Dad, how is that going to help them play football? And he said, son, you got it all wrong. You got it all wrong. I said, what did I get wrong, Dad? He said, son, I'm not a football coach. I said, well, what are you, Dad, if you're not a football coach? He says, I'm a builder of men. And it's 1972, and we're at war in Vietnam. And these players are not going to go to college and play football. You see, they're going to go to war. And they're going to be fighting for themselves and for others. You know, and from that moment on, I mean, even at 12 years old, I didn't know it, but I knew what I wanted to be. I knew exactly what I wanted to be. And that was to be like my father in that regard. So this is that attitudinal disorder phase of shaping and things that are going on. And I know that story is emotional, and I know it sinks home with most people. But I wanted to explain to you how that shaped me to be wired differently, how it should affect you, and how that story can catapult you even through life, even now. Is sometimes we think we're something when we're really not. We're something else. I thought he was a football coach, but no, he was a human being builder, right? And one of the things that he was not was insignificant. I knew I wanted to be like him. I knew I wanted to not be insignificant at that point in my time. So the story goes to the whole point of what I want to talk to you about today real quick is, do you want to be insignificant? So the quote that I shouted out yesterday that created some controversy on Facebook was, the easiest thing in the world to be is insignificant. Right? I'm just sitting here in my office, one of my offices, and I'm all alone, and I don't know why things kind of like this hit me so hard, because I guess I'm wired differently, and I know a lot of you are also. And I know that you can respect what I'm trying to share here is that the easiest thing in the world to be is insignificant. And when I write the book Wired Differently about being wired differently, and I start to search back in my life and how I made my first million or whatever you want to keep track of, and at the age of 30 and all these things, and I wonder what is one of the things that made me successful in life. And it was this attitudinal disorder, this drive, this understanding, this push, this desire, this exceptional thought of not failing, because if you do something wrong, you just may die. I mean, that's how far I took it. But it's this idea of being insignificant that haunts me as a human being. The burden of being significant, though, on the other hand, is monumental. Because you want to be significant in the right way. So here's what I got. I looked it up just to make sure I wasn't going crazy. The definition of insignificant right out of the dictionary is unimportant, trifling, or petty. Omit the insignificant details. Let's omit the insignificant details. Let's just omit the insignificant details. I mean, why should we even have them in the sentence? Why should we even have them in the chapter? Why should we even have them in our book? Why should we even have anything insignificant in this writing, anything that you're reading? Why? Insignificance is unimportant, trifling, or petty. Insignificant human beings aren't bad. They're not. And I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying that they're hard to find. right? All I'm saying here is, hey, if you're watching this and you have any interest about success, if you have any interest about maybe how I did it over 30 plus years, 40 some companies, and I didn't realize it when you're in the throes, but I didn't want to be insignificant. I wanted to be significant. Significant, though, on the other hand, is important, of consequence, right? Is important. It's the opposite of insignificant, of course, because significance is of importance and of consequences. So let's talk about of consequence, because we know what important means, right? But of consequence, that there lies the rub with being significant or being not insignificant. There lies the rub. I made a post yesterday, and I knew what I was doing, okay? Because I was feeling insignificant. Now, here's where the rub's going to happen again with everybody out there. So here, I'm just going to do it, and I know I'm just going to do it. I was feeling insignificant in the political realm because I was afraid to talk about 45. I was afraid to talk about Mr. Trump. Deep down, I know this cat doesn't got it going on all the time, but I also know that the things that we're looking at right now in our society need some direction that I feel that he has been able to bring and will bring. Now, I wish we had the perfect man in the office. Don't go there. I do. I know this man isn't perfect, but I'm not going to be insignificant to the point that I'm going to be afraid to talk about how I feel anymore because of maybe my Wired Differently brand, or maybe because of my donut brand, or maybe because of my payroll brand. I mean, I don't think that I can afford to not be significant in regards to things, or I'm counterintuitive to my brand, my thoughts, and what I say and what I do. But here's what goes on with being insignificant to become significant. Interestingly enough, I had over almost 2,000 views, and I had over 100 comments, and I had to ask people to stop fighting, to be quite frank with you, because every person, believe it or not, I had 50 people that were one side and 50% of the other people the other side, and they were going back and forth. And what I could really see is that Kamala Harris is not insignificant. Joe Biden is not insignificant. I am not insignificant for saying how I feel. This is where we unify as Wired Differently individuals. It's the trait that we have as being wired differently is our ability to understand that all of us don't want to be insignificant. I have a great mentor, Delator, on the deal, and he'll just tell you right now, if two of us are exactly the same, one of us is not necessary. I mean, call him up on his phone. He's got it on his recorder, and he shouts it at you, right? And he probably leans one way different than me, but we collect, and we realize that the greater call of us as human beings is not to pick Trump or Biden. The greater call of us is not to hide from being significant. And part of being significant is sharing our feelings about our thoughts, our political views, our love, our loss, our successes, our failures. You see, insignificant people are not bad. They're just hard to find. So I want to go back to the story about my dad and I and just remind you, I knew what I wanted. I knew I wanted to be like that man. I knew I wanted to be like that moment, and that was to be significant in other people's lives. And as I move through my life in this business, this Wired Differently world that I'm building for myself and this brand and for other people, I realized that is not a greater calling in Wired Differently that I can think of right now that is this drive to not be insignificant. And I want to challenge all of you not to be insignificant. I don't care what you say on the Facebook. I just want you to say what's on your heart in your mind. And I want you to reconcile with your brothers and your sisters that are wired differently in the same fashion that you are. Because I'm wired differently in one way, and you're probably wired differently another way politically. I'm wired differently one way in business, and you might have a different wired differently thing that you're significantly passionate about in another way. And you may raise your children significantly one way, and I may raise my children significantly. I may treat my employees significantly in one way, and you may treat your employees in a different significant way. But at the end of the day, we're in the same lane. We're right in the same lane because we are not insignificant, and we're wired differently in our passion and our tell to tell. Right? The easiest thing in the world to be is insignificant. Insignificant people are not bad. They're good people. They're just hard to find. So I wanted to share that with you today. You know, I think about this stuff all week, and I hope it helps. I hope people can take something from this, and I appreciate everybody. And follow me on Facebook. Follow me on Todd Saylor, Wired Differently YouTube, Wired Differently Facebook, and comment. And make sure you make it damn clear that you are significant. And more importantly, that you never want to be not in, more importantly, you want to be not insignificant. Let's get it right now. Hey, we're all wired differently, and I'm rooting for every one of you. And I want you to continue to watch and be challenged by me in the Wired Differently call. So let's do this thing called life. I appreciate it all. You all have a great day.